anyone who's scared, who's afraid to speak a truth that feels scary because you're worried how the other person might respond. It's like those thresholds of fear actually can push us into even greater liberation that we didn't know was possible. And there is a letting go. I've lost friendships along the way, but I've gained friendships. I've gained myself through it. Some people are meant to be teachers just for a season, and some people are meant to be in our lives forever, even stronger. And so it's like the act of choosing ourselves shows us who wants to choose into that higher version of ourselves too.
Hello there, and welcome to the Poison Honey Podcast, where we discuss the bitter truths of life with raw vulnerability, honesty, and just a dash of humor. I am your host, Manarak of Gray, and today I have Britton and Carolee with me. Today they are sharing their story of awakening from their Mormon programming and reprogramming themselves with new values and way of living that better suits them. And again, I hope this is a story that you can take something from and adapt to your own life wherever you may need it. It's Britton and Carolee.
Yes.
Welcome to the podcast. I'll give you a moment to introduce yourselves.
So we are a couple that was we were both born in Mormonism and raised in it and married in it and started to have our children in it. And through a very strong struggle and pattern of infidelity in our relationship, we sort of met the bottom, and we had to confront our story of where we were, and we attempted to try and heal that through the church, but that didn't work. So we decided to follow our own path, and we left the church and began our healing journey. And that happened in 2019. And then over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, we really dove deep into our healing and had a very magical journey, which ultimately led us to travel, to sell everything, including our home and everything we owned, and travel the world with our 4 children for 18 months. And so it's a very fun, wild ride that led us into a lot of different beautiful places, and where we learned magic and astrology and how we learned how to manifest. And ultimately, what was the most beautiful thing is how we deepened our union, and how we have a very connected, beautiful relationship today that is sexually liberated and so full of joy and bliss that we want to share it with everybody.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything to that, Carolee?
It's been a story of reclamation of the self through really deep shadow work, and choosing in to the self and then choosing into each other. So I guess I just want to add that, our upbringing was very, very programmed. The way in which our life needed to be was a deep, deep program. And we were really good at following that system until we realized that the system wasn't serving us. And so it's our story is one of adventure and love and heartbreak and happiness, but it's really like the adventure of hero and the heroine finding themselves and, finding each other.
Yeah. And so from my understanding, you were both born into the Mormon, we say church or community. Yeah. Yes. And at what point did you have a realization of, or what sparked the journey of healing and getting out for you?
Well, a big part of it was that we tried, going through infidelity as a couple, and then we tried to heal that through the church's process or their method. And it basically didn't yield any results. It didn't have any support for her. And and it was all spiritual bypassing.
Yeah.
And we didn't understand those concepts at the time, but we just knew on the other end of their process that really nothing had fundamentally altered within hers or my being, right?
Yeah.
Like I learned to avoid certain things and sort of the bypassing techniques that people that struggle with infidelity do, but it wasn't real healing. And so that definitely sort of gave us a bitter taste in our mouth about the church. And there was other things too. But what really sparked it was at the towards the end, or you could say the middle of 2019, my brother approached me. We had started dabbling with cannabis, which was kind of a big thing, for a Mormon, and we had never touched that stuff in our youth. And one day he came over to my house and he dropped a bag of mushrooms on my counter, and he's like, "Hey man, you got to try this."
Yeah.
And I was like, "No, I don't think so." And he's like, "Well, just read this book, How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan." And so I was like, okay, I'm totally open to that. So I read the book and I was like, it opened my mind. It really did change my mind. And I was kind of sort of determined to have a ceremony with mushrooms, like in a spiritual way.
Yeah.
So I approached Carolee as soon as I finished the book, and I had been telling her about it as I was reading. I'm like, "Babe, you got to really just check this book out." So she ended up reading it and listening to it. I think we did audiobook. And then we both decided to do a ceremony together. And it was after that first ceremony, the day after, we went to church and saw this stark contrast of like indoctrination of these children. And we were just like, we're out.
Yeah.
So. It might seem kind of funny to plan a mushroom ceremony and then also like within 24 hours be at church.
Yeah.
But we had commitments, we weren't fully going all the time. It was about half of the month we'd attend, but we had commitments that day that our children were performing in like a program. My mother was attending because that's what grandmas do. And so we just flowed with those commitments, and the magic of the medicine really opened our eyes to the programming and that it wasn't going to be the place for us anymore. So that was the last time we ever went to church. Like we left.
I can imagine, especially coming off of like the ceremony and it being, I'm assuming completely different. As Britton said, the vibes and the energy would be completely different. And since it was so close to each other, then it's really you have a shock almost, if I can term it that way, that you suddenly see things that before you wouldn't have noticed. And but can you tell me a bit more about that day? Like you go to church and you see the indoctrination. What are like some of the thoughts that are going through your mind?
Well, I'll go back real quick to the day before during the ceremony, because, we to understand what we saw at church, it's kind of important to see what it is that we saw through this super healing ceremony. At this point, we had been doing various modalities of therapy for a couple of years, and off and on. And I had found yoga, I had found group therapy groups, I had found lots of different things, but I was living with PTSD from the betrayal trauma. And I was really ungrounded and very unhappy in my body. And there weren't a lot of moments of peace through my experience. There were moments where I was really connected to my kids and where I found the beauty of my life, but the underlying energies for me personally were really challenging. And I had begun to see that it wasn't just the infidelity that was impacting me, that there was a lot more from my childhood. There was trauma from my childhood, sexual trauma from my childhood. There was a lot of this programming. And so the mushroom ceremony for me was profound. I remember standing in my kitchen because we had the ceremony at our home. Our children were completely gone for the entire day, and we had a guide that came here into our space, and we made it all. We set the scene, and the set and setting was really important to us.
Yeah.
And I remember standing in my kitchen preparing some food. And it was like in that moment, I was watching my life like a movie in my mind. And I was jumping from different points in my life. And what I was jumping to were actually I had 3 children at this point, and I was rewatching each of their births and experiencing that with the lens of the medicine teaching me about myself and about my kids and about mothering them. And what I experienced was so profoundly changing that I equated it to a equivalent of at least 5 years of therapy, 5 years of intensive therapy, what I felt like I accomplished in one day. And a lot of it really was this approach to our parenting and our children, wanting to do life different for them was a huge kind of underlining current of why we were willing to give everything to our healing. And so the program the following day at church that we had commitments to go to, it's something that in the Mormon church, they do it once a year. It's usually in the fall. It's called the primary program, primary being children.
Okay.
And it's the entire meeting instead of like a preacher up at the top, or, in Mormonism, it's a bishop up at the top and different people giving spiritual talks. It's all children. The children are up there. They're singing songs that they've been practicing. They're reciting scriptures and stories that they've been really rehearsing. So the entire hour and 20 minutes is focused entirely on the kids teaching us. And so it was that contrast of here I saw the energies of my birth and really attuned to this higher perspective of my mother-child relationship. And then I saw what I was allowing my children to regurgitate to me. And so that contrast of the indoctrination of our children without not allowing them access to just their freedom and what we were programming, it was through the kids that we then looked at each other and we were like, we had this side glance and we were like, we can't do this anymore. And so it was like this really healing, and then that contrast of what we were teaching and what we could be teaching, but we also didn't know. There was so much we didn't know, but it was the beginning.
Yeah, I mean that's understandable if you're growing up in this system, so to say, and this is really how you were taught to look at the world and your understanding of the world. Then even for myself, I went through periods where you're discovering so much more about not just the world but like history and just things that you aren't taught in whatever bubble you were born into. And it's so eye-opening, and for me it was an awesome experience as well. And how was the experience for you, Britton?
With leaving the church?
Yeah,
I mean, it was exactly the same. Like I had actually had an experience when I was 18 years old where I'd brought a friend to church and we were watching a similar type. We were there at the similar type of meeting at church, and it was a child and a parent at the pulpit at the microphone, and the parent was whispering into the child's ear what to say,
which is really normal.
Well, it was normal in the church.
It was normal in what we experienced.
And so we experienced that growing up so much that we just thought it was cute.
Yeah.
We didn't realize it was like pure indoctrination. And she, my friend, who was kind of like not a Mormon, she was just interested in coming with me. She was more like interested in me, I think, than the church.
Yeah.
But she like gasped, and she's like, and I was like startled, and she's like, "That's indoctrination." And I'm like, what? Like I didn't understand it at the time, But what was really interesting is that hit me, and it gave me some sort of weird vibration, and it stuck with me. And then fast forward to basically 20 years later, I'm sitting in, after the mushroom ceremony, we're sitting in church and we're seeing the same thing happen. And all of that memory from when I was 18 flooded back to me. And it was like, boom, this is indoctrination. Now you can see it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. So it landed the same for us. And we just lockstep left the church. It wasn't even a hesitation on either part of ours. We just were like, we're out of here.
You have the look and you knew it right away, like we're going to leave. But how was the actual process of leaving?
Well, that was it. That was the process. We just said goodbye. And then like for the next year, we had deconstruction of our, the paradigms that the church implanted. And frankly, we had already been working through some of those paradigms a little bit. There were things that had kind of turned us off to the church that we sort of doubted, but you still there was major concepts that we dealt with. One of them, like for me, I dealt with like the concept of the devil. I had to deconstruct the devil. Mm-hmm. Like, what is the devil? What did it mean? I had to deconstruct the concept of needing a savior to save me. Right. Someone that was going to, forgive me of my sins and that I was unclean before God. That was a difficult one. And then I had to deal with the dissonance of like what Mormons claim to be the only true church, which was, proof of Joseph Smith as a prophet through the Book of Mormon. So there was a lot of complexity in there that we had to like unwind. I think mine was more raveled in than hers a little bit on some of that stuff. But yeah, there's deconstruction for anyone leaving a religion that intense. And so, we gained a lot of wisdom in that. And I think that continued on probably for a few, at least a couple of years while we were deconstructing things.
Yeah, it was like a re-education too. We had to seek out and relearn things, and on this side of our healing, we're actually very grateful for our Mormon upbringing and everything that we learned and gained from the church. We're also very grateful to be completely severed and disconnected from it. Yeah. And free, really. But we had a lot to heal and a lot to look at. And we were guided to incredible books, and healers, and just ways in which to rebuild the sense of self. It was a challenge too.
Yourself emotionally. We were so emotionally disconnected.
Yeah, it was a challenge too in community. Here we were living in Utah, predominantly a Mormon community. And so there was members of the community, friends, neighbors that just didn't want anything to do with us anymore, our children. And so we also had to like navigate that disconnect. Yeah, it's an onion. There's like lots of layers.
Yeah. And is it like a strict disconnect? Like, for example, I think it was with Scientology that the church tells them that you cannot contact those people. Is it that kind of disconnection, or is it just they don't want to be seen with people that left the church?
So there's no, Scientology has almost like an active pressure. Some of these cults have an active pressure of ostracizing people and casting them out once they sort of say, we're done. The Mormon church isn't that way. In fact, they try to pull you back in. They try to have a fellowshipping program to pull you back in and stuff. But there's a cultural pressure that's sort of unconscious that makes you unsafe and untrustworthy. And so that's what happens. It's not that the church is like, oh, we shouldn't love these people anymore. It's just that the people are in their own bodies, can't handle the dissonance of someone walking away from the program. Yeah. And so they just can't, they get triggered inside and basically have to sever connections.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's similar. Here we do have, and I guess we don't have one dominant religion, but the thing is, to be religious, be some kind of Christian and if you are completely none, then you get that dissonance as well. And I don't care which one you're in, just be in one and believe in one of them, because otherwise you get that same kind of dissonance. So I kind of related to that. There's no one running after you per se, that you have to be in it, or don't talk to those people, but there's kind of like a social, cultural understanding that we are a community that we're religious, we're Christian at least, and we believe in God and as you said, the Savior and the devil, because they can't exist without each other, right? And yeah, so the understanding from that sense a bit, the situation that you were in. And so you were in Utah, isn't it?
Yeah, we were living in Utah.
Yeah. And then at some point you decide you're going to travel the world. Is this early on in your journey?
Yeah, so we had the first mushroom ceremony in 2019, in the fall of 2019. And that catapulted us into even deeper healing that we were really needing, and a fourth child. So we had 3 kids before the ceremony. After the ceremony, into 2020, we got pregnant with our 4th. And so 2020, 21, all the way up until the January of 22, it was really deep shadow work and emotional re-education, parenting our kids, trying to still heal like always focusing on healing the relationship that we had. And all of that came to a point in the early months of 22, when Britton came home from a men's retreat and said, I've got it. We're going to do this thing. And he had been listening to a book. Becoming is the name of the book. And in this book, they mentioned this idea of the full fuck yes. And so he, given that we had been in this really deep program our whole lives, that literally had, like, at 8 you get baptized, at 12 if you're a dude you get the priesthood, at 16 you're allowed to date, when you go to college you go to one of 3 schools that are church schools, like that was kind of some of the deep programming. Then you get married and then you have kids and then you repeat the pattern of the baptism and it's like the whole life is planned out for you. And when we were disconnecting from all of that, we realized that there were things, experiences, travel, just life that we hadn't lived because we were living our life for a program, living our life based on the tenets of the culture. I mean, we were both 6th generation Mormon. So it was not just, it was deep ancestral lineage here. And so he came home with this idea that we needed to make a list of all the things that we had always said no to, that we had made excuses for, that we didn't give ourselves permission to do. And we were now going to start saying yes. So we, on that list, there was some really cool healing things. Like I really wanted to do a 200-hour yoga teacher training because yoga had been really fundamentally important for me in my early healing. It still is like a really beautiful way to heal. And we had both called in a desire to do a sexual re-education because so much of our trauma had to do around an unbalance of sexual energies and a lack of understanding around that. So among other things, like we wanted to travel with the kids, like we had this list forming and we began to have things come in, like invitations kind of come into the field that started to like plant the seeds of what we eventually did. But when we first said we're going to live the full fuck yes, we had no idea that would mean eventually selling everything and moving to Bali. It was, But we,
well, I mean, initially what it actually did mean when we were going to root into the house that we were in, because we had sort of like had a little bit of like, we built the home and we were a little bit disgruntled by the neighbor and a little bit annoyed with some of the building, the way it panned out. And so we were like, we're just going to love the home. We're just going to finish all the projects that we had been putting off. So, and that was actually the full fuck yes for us at that moment, was like, let's just live here and be happy. But in 4 months' time, everything shifted in our life. It was insane. It was like, this is why we're writing a book called The Magical Story of Us. And it's the whole healing journey of from infidelity into this awakened union.
Yeah.
And how we discovered astrology and magic and manifestation work and like our own spirituality and following our soul and, this calling of our heart and soul. And so when you jump into this idea of saying yes to everything that life's going to throw at you, like that resonates with the heart, right? Not just yes to everything, but like resonates with the heart. And you're not just like saying no because I don't have the money and I don't have the time and I don't have the resources and all of that got proven to us to be false ideas anyway, because as soon as we did it and we were aligned to the yes, like everything was also given to us to support us in that. Money, people, resources, magical safety, like all of these things happened for us. And so it's a superpower to align yourself to yes. So if like, when you ask the question, you're like, how did we get to the point of like traveling the world? It started with the simple, I'm going to choose into my life again. I'm going to choose into me and my heart. And there's an incredible power. And that's exactly what the universe really wants us to do. Because when we do that, when we step into that place energetically, then we can be guided like so well, like the universe is just going to guide our life and we just continue to say yes to it.
Yeah. And I think it's important what you said, that the yes should resonate with you. I had a flashback of, I think it was Jim Carrey's movie Yes Man or something, that he's just saying yes to absolutely everything, which I think is also not the idea. It should be something that you really internally, energetically, like you're beaming with energy, like yes, I'm gonna do that. And so you sold everything at some point and you're in Bali now? Is that where you are?
Oh, no, we're in Colorado.
Okay.
Bali we spent 5 months at, but
Okay.
like we realized. So, I mean, do you want to jump into that, or do you want to jump into, because we could talk about that pilgrimage journey. But I think what's also important is that we can touch base on like how we did this. How did we heal?
Yeah.
How did we get to the point where we could like follow our heart and trust it enough? Like this is like an important part of our journey.
Whatever you feel like talking about, Brit. I'm not gonna choose the path for you. You tell me what do you want to tell?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give like a quick overview of the journey, because it was the world traveling journey.
Yeah.
And then like maybe Carolee can talk about how we entered into doing ritual shadow work, which is kind of like the book that we're writing, another book that we're writing, but it's going to come out this year, on how we actually managed to heal all of this.
Yeah.
So with the world pilgrimage, basically like she said, at the beginning of 2022, we had decided to live the full fuck yes. And then we called in all these things and they were happening. And by June, we went to that sexual re-education, and it was actually a program called ISTA, the International School of Temple Arts, very, very positive. Okay. And it has helped a lot of people to find their sexual truth of yes and no around where they're at. So it's a very liberating program. We came back from that and we immediately had more neighbors feel that vibration, almost subconsciously feel that vibration of how we had shifted from that. And they immediately were like, oh, we don't want your sons playing it. We don't want your kids playing with our kids anymore. And so we felt that. At the same time, we felt this incredible increase in our vibration. And so we were like, maybe this is not what we need to do, but we pulled some cards. We did some divination work, and it was like, you're being called to move. And we're like, what? We just like started rooting in. So we did. We went ahead and put it up for sale, and we didn't even know where we were going. We anticipated Bali, and initially that fell through, but it looked like it was going to happen. So we just said, well, we'll go to Bali, and maybe that'll be our new home, but we'll just be open to whatever. So by September of 2022, we had everything sold. We walked away from our home with all the furniture in it and all of everything else sold, pretty much, except for like a small van filled of stuff, and like a minivan. And then we went to Bali, and we spent 5 months in Bali doing incredible stuff, including that yoga teacher training that Carolee is talking about. And then we decided about halfway through that, we decided to travel the world, and that was the one thing that we kept saying no to our whole life. They were like, why are we saying no to it now? Let's just go ahead and do it. So we did. We just said, okay, we're going to travel. And all of these opportunities started coming in. Like, Carolee wanted to go to France for her 40th, and it was like perfect timing. She'd always wanted to do that. And like something about Egypt came. And so we bought into a package to go to Egypt, and then boom, boom, boom. We went to Vietnam. We went to France. We went to Ireland, to England, to Scotland.
Then there was the world schooling pop-up. A woman was planning a Harry Potter themed 10 days Harry Potter themed travels. So we said yes to that, and
the kids just loved it. It was so much fun for them. And Carolee and I got matching tattoos in the Scottish Highlands right here. It's like kind of like our divine union tattoos that we got. We both got them in the same place. And
on our anniversary.
And that was on our anniversary, 14th anniversary in the Scottish Highlands. A really beautiful opportunity. Did not see that coming.
But the tattoo artist that's very sought after, like a really good one. And I've been watching her and trying to connect with her for months. And so to line up, there's just a lot of beautiful alignment.
So there was just a lot of magic flowing through everything. You know, it was so infused with synchronicity and with spiritual connection that we just knew we were being guided. And we landed in Egypt and had this 3-week, her and I had this, just without the kids, we had these other women watching the kids, 3 weeks touring the Egyptian temples and having private ceremonies in some of these very sacred places. And so that was really powerful. And it was around that time that we started calling in this home. We were starting to call in like, hey, where's new home going to be? Because we didn't have anything. Yeah. And so, I'm kind of fast forwarding, but like we spent like 8 weeks in Egypt, and then we flew back to Utah for the holidays of 23. And we spent about 2.5 months there. And it was at that time that we were like, well, Colorado seems like a good spot. We'd had some sort of things that pulled us in that direction. And so we went out to Colorado and found a community for our children, like the school community for our 4 kids. And on a whim, 2 weeks later, packed everything that we had, which wasn't much, and, and drove to Colorado. And and just had full faith that things were going to work out, like really deep, strong trust in God and whatever that word means, like the universe, life.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
And spirit, within 5 days of landing in Colorado, we had a connection to our dream home. And so we were just like so thrilled. And I just remember crying that day when we found out and came up and saw it a few days later, but it was just, such a miracle. And so we've been for the last year here in Lyons, Colorado, just building this offering and like, doing these types of interviews and really finding out what it is that we want to share with the world. And we're really excited about what's going on now.
Yeah. Thanks.
So.
And Carolee was going to tell the second part of that.
Part of how so it's a simple answer, but there's a lot to it. And simply put, it actually all began with the moon. Believe it or not. I love that you said that your name.
I mean, I have a moon tattoo. I jokingly call myself a lunatic because I like the
lunatic. Nice. Yes, it really actually began.
So I am Cancer Sun. That's why. And
amazing. I'm a Cancer rising.
Ah, nice. Yeah,
so,
we'll get into the astrology later because
we've got the sun, the moon, and the rising.
My
3 of us.
My rising is Scorpio, and I'm a Leo's moon.
Oh, cool! Yeah. His rising Scorpio too.
Ah, nice.
So Yeah. So, if we fast forward back or rewind,
Yeah.
rewind back to kind of, the part of the story where we were like really deep in our pain,
Yeah.
and the ache of just the heaviness of lifetimes, and here I was very much struggling, and I didn't know what to do. And I was in these different like healing containers, and I was getting an emotional re-education through a year-long program that I had signed up for 2020 and all this different stuff. And I was reading these different feminine spirituality books. Like, there was coming at me in lots of different directions, but this incredibly this woman I love so much, who's actually now a sister-in-law. I introduced her to my brother, and they were meant to be. But before all of that, she was just this friend that I felt this deep connection with her. And she gifted me a book. It's actually right here, Moon. It says Moon Bath. She gifted me this Moon Bath book. And I began to do the rituals, the little self-care experiences that were connected to the moon. So this book itself has the 4 seasons and then the 4 phases. And it would be like a full moon summer bath. Use these botanicals, make a tea, do this self-care ritual practice, and then bathe with the bath. And when I first started doing it,
do you mean bathe with the moon?
Bathe with the moon. Yeah. When I first started, yeah, you followed. When I first started this ritual, I didn't even realize it was a ritual. That word wasn't even common for me. It was just, I have a lot of Taurus placements in my astrology, putting the astrology to the side, but it's there, it's important. And so the sensual soaking with the elements, with the bath, I would have a glass of wine. I would make some really yummy chocolate. I would play a really beautiful playlist. And I just started connecting to these energies. And what I didn't realize is I was actually aligning myself astrologically with the current transits through the rulership of the moon, which, as a Cancer rising, the moon is my ruler, right? Like, I'm very connected to the moon and her energies. And so it began as just this play, this way to like take care of my heart and my body. But then it evolved, it was like a year into it. I also started looking at astrology from like, I find on Instagram different posts that talked about the moon that I was actually bathing with, and the energies of the placements. And all of a sudden, I noticed that these astrologers were perfectly describing the very thing. Like, I could tell the story based on these posts of what my life was currently experiencing. And so that felt profound. I was like, how do they know? How do they know to the T, like what it is, the relationships, the conversations, the difficulties, the challenges, all of this, and so that dove into this deep practice of using the moon as a mirror, as a reflective energy, but not just to like light and love and what we feel good about. No, like the reflective energy into the depths of who we are, and what it is that's potentially blocking us, that is blocking us from rising into that. And so it became this way of identifying like the shadow through the illumination of the moon. So that's kind of the introduction to like where it all started. Really was with this moon connection, and now it's evolved into this very intentional practice. We do a lot of manifestation work, scripting work. I mean, we had a new moon in Taurus yesterday, and so today, real time, we have this beautiful altar here in our temple room. That's where we're you can't see the other side of the room.
Right.
You see just this corner, but like there's a gong and there's crystal bowls and there's this beautiful altar and there's my apothecary. We have all of this magic in this room. And later today, we will clear our entire altar and we're going to reset it. We reset our altar every new moon. It's a good time for a new beginning, a new clearing, right? And so we live with this real intentionality with the cycles, the astrological cycles and the earth cycles. And there's a lot of like alchemical magic in our life now, but it illuminates our shadows. It illuminates what it is that we need to witness and to hold space for and to love about ourselves.
Nice.
Yeah, I would just follow that up with saying, like early on in that healing journey, we just discovered that it's all about doing shadow work. If you want to heal, you've got to dive into your shadows. You've got to approach your unconscious energy. You've got to be humble enough to recognize that you're full of it. You're just full of it. And everyone is. There's no reason to like compare about whose shadow's this and that shadow.
Right.
Like you just understand that we're all full of it. And it's part of the process of being human is to integrate that shadow, to love it, to understand it, to fully absorb it into your being so that no longer runs your program.
Yeah.
And that you become more conscious through that process. And you also connect to the divine stronger. You build your relationship. Like our relationship is what it is now because we had the commitment to doing this work.
Yeah.
And so the most important thing that we like to tell people when we share our story is doing the inner work. The shadow work is so important. It's actually the most important thing anyone could do in their life right now. There's so many things that life wants to pull us to, but we made that commitment. And from like 9 p.m. to midnight, because we had 3 kids and we were, had a 4th one come and she was just nursing. Like we basically had almost no time to do our healing work together, but we found these moments basically from, 9 to midnight in our early part of our healing journey where we would just connect and talk and really dive into like our unconscious and own it and be truthful and honest. So that was basically what we did. And through that commitment of this turned into these moon baths and using the energy and the cycles of the moon phases, you're able to illuminate those shadows faster. You're able to see them, like you're given the opportunity to see them when you create space for that.
Yeah.
And so there's a significant improvement in efficiency, if you will, also in using a partner. So there's like a combination of using a partnership, using the moon, creating intentional space to do the shadow work. And that's the book that we're writing called Ritual Shadow Work.
Nice. Really, when it's out, I want to know so I can check it out. But yeah, I think it's really nice that you created this space together that you can do. So you also take the moon baths, Britton?
Oh,
So
for
you
sure.
take,
Nice.
At the beginning, it was just like a me thing.
Yeah.
Like for a while there, it was just me. But then, they got really elaborate. Like I'd make my favorite French dessert, mousse au chocolat. And then I'd have like a really nice glass of red wine to pair. Yeah. And then I'd have this beautiful smoke and the music and the herbs. And he just started going like,
I think I want to join.
Yeah, you want in.
Nice. At first, I'll be honest, I was like,
yeah,
okay, me time. But I can't imagine having my moon baths without him. Now right now in our home here in Colorado, we have this gorgeous copper tub, and it's big enough for both of us. So we just sink in and we do it all together. We love it.
Yeah, I think it's you don't always find that two people go into this type of work really together. As at least I haven't seen many like what you do, that you really do it together. Maybe sometimes you have one of the partners a bit more into it and the other ones maybe like curiously watching what's going on. But I do think it's maybe amplifying also that energy, since you're doing it together and very intentionally in that way. I think that's really nice, and I've really enjoyed hearing your story and your path that you went on. I think we had I was raised Catholic, so in that sense it's different, but there's still some similarities with my own journey. I'm kind of jealous that I can't really have a altar because I live with very Catholic parents still. So I was in the Netherlands and I moved back, and I'm now with my parents. So I can't really have an altar because we're going to have discussions about that being the devil's work or whatever,
Yeah, totally.
which I try to avoid. So, yeah. Um, I wanted to ask if there's anything else that you would like to share with the audience.
I would like to say, that as soon as we started our journey of healing, like leaving the Mormon church, there was beautiful magic that began to infuse everything. And this is why we call it the magical journey, magical story of us, because it's a magical story that's waiting for everyone. And when we choose ourselves, when we finally stop saying no to ourselves and we choose into what we want, we stop self-sacrificing, we stop following the sort of cultural paradigms that we think we have to, or that family is putting upon us, and like we really step into our own path, this is the moment the magic just infuses everything. And I remember not ever noticing synchronicity of numbers before my first mushroom journey. And in that journey, we saw, I think it was 333.
We saw 222.
222.
And 111. I think it was like 111,
happening.
222.
And I was even then I was like, nah, whatever. It's just a coincidence. But that has not stopped since then. And it's been so many beautiful magic things that have happened. Like we were in Vietnam and we almost got detained in Vietnam. But Carolee tuned into this thing. Like she was like, I'm grateful that we're all on the plane. And that
it was over a hand pan. He had his big hand pan that was like a big turtle shell.
They didn't want it on the plane.
They didn't really want it, but we had just had it on a plane.
Right.
It was the connecting flight and they were being weird. So I said, I am so grateful that all of us and everything we need is safely on the plane. And
this is at the airport, right? So we're sitting there and the guy, we kind of walked away from him, but he came back and found us in line where he was trying to. And I was standing in front of him and he could not see me nor any of my family. He was looking all over and we were just invisible to him. And it was like these little magical things happen everywhere. It was so much fun. And so there's so much magic awaiting all of us if we're just willing to step into our path.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful summary of.
I think it's a beautiful summary.
No, I was going to ask you if you want to say. So, Britton, that's a beautiful summary. And do you have anything else to say, Carolee?
I guess I'll just add to it. It does take courage. It's not like it's going to be nothing was instantaneously easy, except for, becoming invisible at an airport in Vietnam. That was pretty instant.
Yeah.
And it was so obvious that they just couldn't see us, that we were all blown away in that moment of how did that happen. But I had to, in my healing, I had to reset boundaries. Even my own mom, for a minute, I had to say, Mom, I had a moment where I broke up with her, right? Because her expectation to me and my expectation to her and our codependence together, and that was hard. Some relationships throughout this journey have ended and not been repaired or not been they just were meant to end. And that was okay. And then other relationships like the one with my mother, not only did they end and then they came back even stronger. I love to write. I'm a poet. I'm a creative. I'm a photographer. And so I put these words together, and I actually have a Substack that I started just recently, just for fun, to share some of my writings.
Yeah.
And, my very first subscriber was actually my mom. And I was so happy about it because she knows, I mean, in that first article that I wrote, I was like, I even wrote about the orgasm that I had had that morning, right? Like, I'm not afraid of talking about the entire human experience. The feminine experience is about giving and serving and receiving. So I'm going to talk about when I give and when I love my children and when I guide them and when I teach them. And then I'm also going to share in my writings what it feels like to receive my lover and to like drop into that eros and that orgasmic bliss with him. And for my still Mormon mom, she's very Mormon, you know, like these topics are probably going to make her blush, but she's still subscribing because she's like, I love you and I love watching you be happy. Right. So like but it took a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage. So I want, you know, that final thing of like anyone who's scared, who's afraid to speak a truth that feels scary because you're worried how the other person might respond. It's like those thresholds of fear actually can push us into even greater liberation that we didn't know was possible. And there is a letting go, you know, I've lost friendships along the way, but I've gained friendships. I've gained myself through it. You know, some people are meant to be teachers just for a season, and some people are meant to be in our lives forever, even stronger. And so it's like the act of choosing ourselves shows us who wants to choose into that higher version of ourselves too.
I've got a little quote I just want to add.
Yeah, go ahead.
All of this.
Yeah.
Because you talked about your Christian roots, your Catholic roots, right? And we were Christian as Mormons. Jesus says, you know, whosoever shall lose his life for my sake shall find it. And I think that that's what we accomplished. We lost our lives. We lost our old life and we found ourselves. And that is the teaching. When you walk away from everything you know that isn't resonating, that isn't what you were truly choosing into, then you find yourself. It's the paradoxes, right? Everything, all truth is always wrapped in a paradox. So that's one way you know it's truth. But beautiful, beautiful words from Yeshua.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I think I'll close to say I think that a lot of people read the Bible but they don't really understand like the layers of what is actually saying, and they might take some things just from again that bubble that told them that's what that means, and we look further. But sometimes you walk away from something and then you really start understanding what it's about, and we can go into a lot of a whole different hour just on that concept, I think. Sure. I think we're gonna wrap up, and I mean you're always welcome back, and we can maybe talk more about those more symbolical part and maybe astrology if you like, and these things. But
I always love talking about astrology. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for
Can you share with your audience our website?
Of course, yes. Go ahead.
So if anyone in your audience is interested in, first hearing more about our magical journey and connecting to our offerings, including the book that we'll be releasing in later this year called Ritual Shadow Work, they can go to themagicalstoryofus.com. And from there, they can join our mailing list and see more about, what offerings we have. Themagicalstoryofus.com.
Thank you. I'll include it in the description so they can easily find it there. Yeah. So thank you so much. And until next time on the Poison Honey podcast. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.